As we continue on this discussion on depression, and again, I'm going to reiterate the points are to look at so many things that we can do, which I intend for that to be hopeful. There are so many things that we can do. That's
right. There are, and that can, in a lot of people, become analysis paralysis. And when you are the depressed person, any potential, you could do this, you could do that, becomes a difficult decision, right? And so again, we're not speaking to the suicidally depressed. We're speaking to the people who are blue, who are underneath their maximum performance, or they feel too tired, or they feel, like we said at the beginning, all of these things could be related to depression as the diagnosis, but they're going to be interrelated with everything else that we talk about. And you're right. It's encouraging that, hey, you don't have to be blue. There are so many things that you can do.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that with compassion, because
these are
hard.
Yeah. These are likely to help the blueness, not guarantees, not judgments that if you're blue and not doing these, you should be judged. But these are things, and these are also things that are going to help a zillion things,
Yeah.
It's going to help anything and everything, but specifically to depression, that's what we're looking at. And so on that note, I showed you the other day, I found it was a I'm always interested in the headlines.
Yeah.
The headlines are depicting what the pulse is out there, what people are talking about, because the headlines, the news wants to showcase stuff you're interested in because that's what makes them money. So apparently you're interested in depression because they keep posting stuff on that. So this was a recent one on, what was the headline, was Saint, Hope for New Treatment of Depression. This was in CBS, and Saint is Stanford Accelerated Intelligent Neuromodulation Therapy. Shows a picture of a lady. She's in a, kind of a medical chair. Dude's next to her with some kind of a apparatus on her brain that's showcasing something on the screen. And our point isn't to get into whatever that is, right, unless you want to.
Well, I can comment on it. It's going to be under the, big picture kind of thought process of neuromodulation. Which means, how do you change your brain?
Okay. Is this, you deal with this. You have patients that you prescribe to.
Yeah. Neurotherapy.
Neurotherapy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And your wife does similar stuff, thinking about it through the educational lens of how, and we're right back. And Kevin, this is so big. It's a broad swath of thought. It's so frustrating because it is so big. But, they throw in a fancy word of neuromodulation, and it's, well, how do you change your brain? How do you change your neurons? Well, my goodness, I would roll my eyeballs at you and say, well, go to bed on time and quit watching TV so much. And if you're listening to us, maybe you should turn us off and go for a walk in the woods, or 1,000 other things. But the encouraging thing is that you can change your brain. And there's a lot of things that you can do. You don't have to go to Stanford and get your brain hooked up to something that's going to, not require you to actually go exercise or quit eating too much sugar or whatever. And they're going to modulate your brain. Now, actually, this is what people want to do. Don't make me change my life. Just make me be okay. And as I've said before, I don't let people say happy. Can I just be happy again? That's what depressed blue people say.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's hard work, and it's directional, and it's all of these things. And before you get to Stanford, or before you get to some of the other things that we're talking about, don't forget the basics. Don't forget the foundation. Don't forget those things. Okay, so for the person who's doing those and saying, okay, I am, what else can I do out there to modulate my brain? Do I need to go to Stanford and do the Saint thing? Maybe. But what else? How do you, and what are these guys doing, right? Like, she's sitting there, and it's going to be some kind of that picture where, her head's attached to something, and it's doing both. It's sensing the brain waves, and it's going to put brain waves in. It's going to put electromagnetic waves in. And we've talked about this before. What is light therapy, or photobiomodulation, or laser therapy, or sauna therapy? And we just talked about it last time. We said, yes, go forest bathing.
Yeah.
Go sun bathing. Now don't get cancer. It's good for you.
And this is the hopeful and frustrating thing.
Yeah.
Is it all in my head? Yes.
Yes.
It's pretty much all in my head because, you're talking about this. We've also got people like Tim Ferriss and Michael Pollan who are talking ad nauseum about psychedelics right now.
Yeah.
And what they can do. Yeah. Again, another great thing.
Dr. Attia as well.
And what frustrates me, however, it should be hopeful, but is how just as impacting, maybe more, would it be of, I just saw a little meme and it was some little girl sitting there sad saying, I really had my hopes up that I would wake up this morning rich, and how would that affect everybody's brain modulation right now if they woke up tomorrow morning and some foundation for something that you had done or for no reason, whatever, and there was 10 million bucks sitting in your bank? How would that change your lives? For a lot of people, at least initially, it would be the best day ever.
There would be a perception of happiness. I mean,
giddiness of, oh my gosh, whether it's something I can get for myself, something I can do for somebody else, a stress I can take away. And just as much if they woke up tomorrow morning and their most beloved relationship, the person died tragically, horrifically, kidnapped, beaten, whatever. How would that change? And again, it's a construct in our head based on X, and that's what we're talking about. And we are talking about modulating, opportunities. There's so many of them when we're looking at depression, ways that we can program ourselves and try to help the blueness, as you said.
Yeah. And of course, by the time people are in my office, they're often beyond blue and depressed. And I have spent many minutes, probably hours with some people to try to speak through that bothness of, is the pain, quote unquote, real, quote unquote, or is it in my head?
Real or perceived? Just as powerful.
Yes. And the answer is both. Yeah. All the time, both. But for the person in pain, for me to insinuate at all that they're imagining this or that it's quote unquote not real, they get stuck there. And I roll my eyeballs in order for you to get past this, you're going to have to be able to step outside of yourself and with wisdom and integrity and honesty, be able to be mature in order to see that it is both. And I'm so sorry, right? Like there's not going to be the concrete thing to do.
Yeah. Cause we've got to say this with compassion, with no judgment, that you and I are just as prone to it.
Sure.
As anyone. Now we do have the opportunity to every day be doing the things, to be thinking the thoughts that will help us guard against going down that path. And that, again, that's what we're talking about here. Yeah. None of us have arrived. Like you said, we're always going to be on the spectrum for the rest of our lives of depression.
Sure.
And we're going to be closer to a 1 or a 10.
Right. And at the bothness of that is we're on the exact same spectrum towards peace and well-being.
Yeah. And then what I keep coming to is there's spectrums on the spectrum because, is it one spectrum of depression or not? Or are there areas of my life where I say, gosh, in this area of my life, I am so inspired. In this area, I'm depressed.
Yeah.
Both. And I do want to pull out something that you said that honestly is probably worth an entire show, but reading this morning in the book that you saw me, I had it at coffee, Awareness by Anthony DeMello. And he talked about there specifically, he was talking to psychologists or about psychologists and psychotherapists, of which he is, and yet he was poking at them. But he said, most of our patients come there not for healing, not for a cure. They're just coming for relief. We do not want to change. We just want relief from whatever,
from the consequences of what.
From the consequences.
I agree. Yeah.
And I thought, well, yeah, that's me. There's a bunch of areas that do I want to cure? I could make a list right now. No, I just don't want the pain. I don't want to deal with it.
Right. I want to have my cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
I want to have my cake and not have diabetes.
Yeah.
And yes. And there are theologians that we know that pound on that, like black, white, right, wrong, sin and evil, and thou shalt not. And then there's ooey gooey, ishy, squishy,
everything
psychological.
Whatever
you're okay. You just be okay. Just be okay.
I read something recently that said if your spirituality does not hold within it, I'm paraphrasing dramatically, that does not hold within it any accountability, I question it. That's our favorite spirituality and overall faith
anything
is
goes.
whatever doesn't hold me accountable to anything I don't want.
That's right. And that's where I think you and I perceive that so many people are stuck in without awareness is I want what I want, and I don't want the consequences.
We should do a show just on accountability, because
I'm depressed, Kevin, right now.
I would raise my hand as I am the person. I do not want accountability. I do not like authority in my life. I do not like to submit to stuff. And yet, thank God for the accountability of my body at how it feels. Otherwise, I would eat nothing but donuts.
I was going to say, here's the blessing of pain.
That's your line that
I'm so sorry. And in fact, now I'm depressed.
I know I'm depressed. Well, on that again, and with all, compassion and gravity, type in depression. I just did this. So I typed it into Google. I don't have to go through it all, but I mean, it's just, again, it's obviously such a huge, consistent, growing topic.
When we did that, notice that the top hits, Saint was there, psilocybin was there, ketamine was there. And what isn't at the top of the list is exercise, go to bed on time, get off social media. Okay. So back at the beginning, you said you like to go to headlines, and yet you're a fan of propaganda. And I would say, well, are headlines reflecting people, or are headlines directing people? And the answer is both.
Both, though I will give some credence to, they're going to put there what they clicks. Think I'll click on.
Yes. So, okay. So it's the bothness. Yeah. And we also know that the more the headlines put in what they put in, they are also directing some of what people click, because that's how the thing works.
And I have to go, and I didn't look, is the headline article on this Saint thing. I saw it on CBS, but if I read the fine print, was it actually paid content by Stanford University or whoever makes the Saint? Right. I don't know.
Or whoever owns CBS to make you click in over here. And okay, so you and I are very beyond skeptical on this kind of a front. Mm-hmm. But my point there is, there isn't, just like if you Google cancer, the first hit is going to be drugs and surgery, and look how awesome we are. It's not going to be go to bed on time and eat your vegetables. Mm-hmm. And that's on page 50. You'll never see it. And so my point there on the depression side is, people are hoping for the life preserver to be tossed to them out there in their waters and their waves. And I'm waters and waves. And we're saying, yeah, you got to do the work of swimming, but no, just throw me something, throw me a bone, throw me the life raft. And that's what these medicines are. And they're awesome, right? Like 10 years ago, I poo-pooed and would not have even thought twice about marijuana, but I've seen it help certain people so much that I would say it's on the table. But I'm going to look at my 15-year-old and say, no, I just black and whited it, right? Is there, if he's an epileptic, then maybe, right? Like that's where it can be good.
I wish I had known about it.
For your son, it would have been. And you know what? Now I would tell your son right now, you better be keto. You better prove it. And you better prove that being 3 months there with your brain stuff. I haven't talked to him about that, but he should. Anybody in the brain world, in the extreme brain world of cancer and epilepsy, even the normal, not functional doctors are going to say, okay, first get to be keto and stay there. And then we'll talk about whatever else.
Gosh. Okay. I didn't have that on the list. We talked about, actually, I do have that on the list, is nutrition, giving the body what it needs, leaving out what it doesn't. So if we're back to just the basic, hey, here are some ingredients for depression, I'm going to guess you're going to say,
absolutely,
not only nutrition, but good nutrition, but keto directed.
Well, the drug of sugar, and we have to say that very gently and all of that. But
no, we don't. You don't. Okay, that was our last show. If you probably don't remember. It's 2 shows ago. Was on sugar, and mainly, you don't know this. So I did a meme out there. I did my research, and it was something to the effect of 1 out of 26 Americans has an alcohol disorder. Okay, so we look at that and poke at that. But if we look at all the outcomes of sugar, diabetes, prediabetes, 1 in 3.
1 in 3.
So my statement was, so which is the worst drug, and who is and is not an addict?
There's another whole show there. And to throw another layer of complexity in there, Peter Attia, that I quote a lot, just interviewed, I forgot his name, but he's some psychiatrist in the world of this psilocybin stuff and psychedelics and all of that, and the history of how we messed it all up and how can we use these things for good. And they've done a construct that says, based on cost and consequences, what is the number one most destructive drug out there? And by far it was alcohol. So alcohol, because of the downstream consequences of both acute alcoholism, I'm drunk and I drive, and chronic, I lost my job and whatever else. Smoking was on down the line,
Well,
but they didn't bring in sugar for
I was going to
various
say,
reasons.
basically, because that's where I'm concerned. If you look at the number of lives affected,
Lives lost, jobs lost, families lost,
negative consequences. Meaning, if I've got 100
overwhelming.
workers in my in my factory, 100 workers in my factory, and my sustenance is based on their productivity, it's arguable to say, if you got three choices, do you want them to which do you want to take away? Smoking, drinking, or sugar?
You're going to go with sugar.
Statistically, but
statistically,
that is, like you say, that is not on the table.
Oh no,
it's
a paradigm shift, because here's why. Smoking and drinking are clear, black and white. You're not going to die without. Well, you and I talked recently about eat what you are, not you are what you eat. And one of the things you are not is carbohydrate, but you are fat and protein and water. That's what your body is made up of, and a smidge of these trace minerals. But mostly you are fat, protein, and water. All right. So eat what you are. And if we take away all carbohydrates, you will not die. If we take away protein, you'll die. If we take away fat, you'll die. If we take away trace minerals, and you
that is die. Interesting. Back to the Alone show or documentary, those guys
or what you ever call it. They did not try to go out and find a corn patch.
Well, because you could make the case for that they were, they need electrolytes, they need sugar. That's what we would in America think, oh my gosh, they got to go find some fruit or something like that, or their glycogen stores are going to go down. And no, it was fat.
Protein.
Fat and protein.
Yep.
Well, protein as a given, and then realizing I need fattier protein. And they went for the 100 days pretty much with no sugar for the most part, no carbs at all.
Right. Living, quote unquote, off the land meant.
Like your patient, it was a carnivore diet for the most part.
Yeah. Well, and we've had two people full on 30 days carnivore diets. It didn't work for them. And I'm not certainly suggesting that as a normal. And there's going to be people who are fine on a mostly carb, whatever. So that's not the issue. But the issue is to recognize.
If we go to depression, we're talking about this, and we're talking about the brain. There's you're in the studies of keto and brain food, 1, and 2. What is our propensity when we're blue? Let's back up.
What do people want to do?
Comfort food. Yeah. So if I'm depressed, I am the most prone to go towards the comfort food, which is the most inflammatory.
Yes. That's where I was just going to go. My favorite author in that one is Martha Hubbard. Herbert, like Hebert, like French Herbert, Martha Herbert or Hebert at Harvard. And her construct of depression is brain inflammation.
Really?
And so last time we talked, insulin glucose, and just call it an inflammatory toxic substance that you'll die without, but it has to be super duper protected. And so again, everybody out there hearing me, we have all known Blue Monday and Relief Fridays, Happy Fridays. And is the paradigm the construct of too many carbs? And then when we are blue, what do we tend to reach for? A chip, an ice cream, a candy, a something. And nobody reaches for broccoli naturally.
Yeah, I've never said, man, I'm kind of feeling blue. I'm going to go get a raw veggie tray at the grocery store.
Even carrots or something like that. No.
I want wine and cheesecake and pizza.
That's right. And so this is what people will get it when we say it like this. You and I don't have caffeine headaches, but we know people that do. What makes your caffeine headache feel better?
Caffeine.
That's right. It's the exact same thing. If you have cocaine and you're coming off your cocaine, what makes you feel better?
Cocaine.
And you'll die without it. If you're addicted to the level of you'll die without it. That's what's happening. But societally, we're blind. We're back to awareness. And it's the last thing the fish sees is the water. And we're swimming in the water of carbohydrates. So back to the average person out there listening and struggling maybe with this blueness and whatever else. it's overwhelming to so many people to say, well, my gosh, you're making me be no carb, low carb, keto, whatever. And I would say, no, be becoming just a little bit more aware so that with wisdom and honesty and grace and integrity, you can say, I think I'm going to skip my mid-morning snack and I'm going to go on a walk, have a glass of water. You and I like the Perrier, lime flavored, whatever stuff. And okay, there's all these other things to do that you can do that will make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, so nutrition, I'm going to come because it's such a correlated issue into sleep. This is not rocket science. We talk about sleep all the time, but again, if somebody who's depressed, what's one of the best healing things for the inflamed brain or whatever is sleep. Interestingly, as we are more prone to, when depressed, not exercise.
Well, and you have to be a little careful here on the lay side of things because many depressed people sleep too much.
Well, okay, but I was going to get it. But if you're not exercising, you're eating the comfort food, even if you're in bed for 14 hours.
Your sleep is dysregulated.
Exactly. Yeah. So you may be in there forever, lolling around.
But you're not waking up refreshed and ready to go.
Yeah, you're not getting quality sleep is where I was going. And it'd be an interesting thing to do with that nobody's going to notice you're wearing an Aura ring to show you that, yeah, you were in bed, but how long were you actually asleep? How much deep sleep, REM sleep, light sleep, yada, yada, are you actually getting? So that's
another techno wearable thing we could toss out there. I don't know if I've talked with you about it, but we just selected our first 50 patients that we're going to do this with is Heads Up Health. Did we talk about it?
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know the device though.
Well, Heads Up Health is an internet app website that will let your Garmin and Strava and Keto Mojo and Breath Sense and continuous glucose monitor and Aura Ring will automatically connect in, and then you can step back and see patterns.
Okay.
So when somebody says, gosh, what is going on? I'm so blue. And you can step back and see, well, the pattern of every time we have a stressful meeting, I have a week of something, or every time I get away from my exercise, it's the third week after that I get more blue or. Now I want to caution that because now we're saying at the end of the day, back to AI, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to wake up and your watch is going to tell you if you're blue or not, right? Like I don't believe that's ever going to be the case, but it is a feedback loop to the captain of the ship that's steering through the waters of life to say, be aware of the pattern of sugar, of lack of exercise, of sleep, of stress, so that you can steer towards, and I'm always going to come back to better sleep, better exercise, better way to communicate with your wife and your kid and your dog and your boss in order to achieve or to be heading towards that which we would call not depression or peace, not anxiety or satisfaction. And you have to wake up tomorrow and do it again.
Yeah. And as you read off the list, and as we're talking here, I keep thinking of, so people are listening, and this is going to be relevant for a lot of them. I mean, to a degree, it's relevant. We're all on the spectrum. It's relevant for all of us to hear. Some of those of you who are dealing with being blue, obviously it's directly relevant, but a lot of people are going to hear this who have loved ones, family members, whatever, who they're looking at this counsel to say, well, how can I help this person? That is where I like the list of menu items, I'm going to call them here, because you can look at, let's say it's a teen, and say, what can I get them to do? I may not be able to get them to sleep, to change their sleep. I may not be able to get them to deal with their comfort food. Can I invite them on a walk with me and try to help with the exercise and the BDN up? Maybe so. Can I help with, one of the other aspects of ingredients here, the input that they're given, try to give them some inspirational content. Can I help them with some solitude? Can I get them outside? We're going for what can you get them to do? Another one here, and I had them separated. I guess we could put them together, but is faith and hope. I mean, we just spent the morning talking about faith, but when we see depression, when we see apathy, a word that goes right along with that is often hopelessness.
Yeah.
If there's nothing they're looking forward to, there's no bigger picture. It was my dad, I mentioned this in the last show, is he was in psychology, saying one of the best treatments he saw for people dealing with depression was go find somebody to serve, because it gets us out of looking at ourselves and struggling with ourselves to some place. But faith, do we have faith in? And we can look at this, do you have faith in a bigger, and a greater purpose, whether that's humanity, saving the planet, my gosh, a cause, just a cause. So get out of spirituality even and just saying, do I have faith in humanity and a cause? And we can see somebody who's depressed, find inspiration and hope and finding something to serve.
Yes.
Give them a disabled cat. Man, I'm not poking fun at it, but just saying something to serve, something to take care of, a plant or whatever sometimes. Now, spirituality then is another piece. If you feel that there is a greater purpose, a greater power, and calling to that, it can be a great ingredient. It's one that I benefit from.
And me too. And so then we run the risk here of an overly clinical approach to this, to say, is faith dopamine and epinephrine and oxytocin and these other things?
Sure.
Right. But then why not just inject some dopamine in there at the right amount and those kind of things? So there's the mystery. That's my point, is there's a transcendent mystery right now that even with the best of technologies, we don't know. But here's what we do know. Is there really well done studies that will say, hey, for those people who are consistently in this realm of faith activities, do they tend to have less depression? Is the probability of less? Yes. Mm-hmm. And in that realm, the people who tend to belong to communities where people are like-minded, purposeful, community, do they tend to have less depression? Yes. And that's where I'd say the science is overwhelmingly in favor of having a faith in something. Mm-hmm. Overwhelmingly. And we've just gone through 10 or 20 years of the quote unquote new atheists who say, no, you're just dancing to your DNA. You're just a mass of chemicals. And at the end of life is nothingness and eat, drink, and be merry. Okay, well, we're not going to put the guy in jail. But at the end of the day, if you are in a group of people who tend to think that way in mass and whatever, is there more depression? Yes. We know that. Now, that's not going to be popularly written on the Google thing there, but at least through my lens, when you honestly approach the situation, not in a religious sense, but just in a faith community, a purposeful community.
Yeah. Okay. I thought you were going to, because I was going to say, even if we get outside of, Kevin's belief and Randy's, where you put your faith, that if we're just looking at correlation, I am very aware that as I look at the world of personal development and self-help and this world that I live in, and the, hundreds of books sitting here from the best of the best, I don't know of one atheist within there. Now, that's a volatile statement right there. That's not me saying right or wrong. It's just a flat correlation. I just don't happen to have a book on the bestseller list that's from a devout, atheist. Now, they may be agnostic. They may not claim whatever, but it's interesting correlation that they all believe that there's a
transcendent.
Yes.
That I put Kotler on the edge there, since we, but he openly also says, that there's no, God faith kind of thing over here, but he's passionate about service to his causes.
Yeah.
The earth and animals and writing and creativity and all.
Well, I would say he has a faith, he has a hope, he has a greater purpose for his life.
Yeah.
Outside of just himself.
Yeah. And he might wind up depressed, but the chances are less. Scientifically, statistically, we would say. And so for somebody out there who's tending towards blue, I agree that's an ingredient on the list, is to say, okay, well, step back and in the bluest of blue, you're not going to be able to think of anything, but on a brighter day, say, you know what, I really am passionate about XYZ. Go and invest.
Okay. Well, you said the word a second ago in relation to faith, and you said the word community. That's another big ingredient on the menu here, is relationships. Mm-hmm. Specific, relationships, whether that's one person, a meaningful relationship. You and I have that. We get to spend every day just about with each other, investing in a one-on-one relationship. Mm-hmm. We just got back from coffee with a handful of guys in a community, and we talked about, church, and talked about, social groups, whatever it is. But the power of community, we often find, as talking about correlation, people suffering with depression are generally isolated to begin with, or they found themselves, or as they become blue, they actively isolate.
Right.
Not actively, like they, try to, but that's
right.
Propensity to that. Again, to pull people into relationship is another opportunity.
Yes. And I'm so sorry, because you know what? People are messy and they're selfish and they hurt you. And I think this will drive the point home, like we just said about caffeine over here with coffee and a headache and whatever. Is like, oh yeah, what makes me feel better is the actual food. That's part of my problem. And when people are depressed, a lot of times I'll say, well, so-and-so did something to me, I'm going to withdraw. And so-and-so is selfish, or I just don't want to pour into these needy people because of whatever. And in reality, what we find is when you do that, it is better. And my correlation there is, I'm going to say, what about physical therapy? Do you remember, you break your leg, and you remember what I told you PT stands for?
No.
So everybody says, well, okay, you got to get the cast off, and now you got to do PT. And what does PT mean? It means pain and torture.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So if you're going to a physical therapist and they're all easy, nice, soft on you, they're not doing their job.
Yeah.
What's better for your knee is to move it. But every fiber of your being is saying, don't move it. It hurts. We're going to go through this a little bit at a time. That's good for you. And we actually pay this person to torture me.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if we did that over here with depression, and we said, you know what, we're going to come over, we're going to yank you out of your bed, and we're going to drag you over here to this, pain in the butt people called, church community or feed the animals community or whatever else. And they're going to complain. And it's your job, Kevin, to set up the meeting and make it happen. Well, I'm depressed and I don't want to be here, and all these people are making me mad. But at the end of the day, the probability that is, if you actually do those kind of things, and now people have to do it with wisdom and grace and integrity and whatever. Now I've depressed myself again because
well, interesting, because you were, talking about relationships and isolating. I was to say the word, so identify personally with the word depression, because I always feel, interested, fairly excited, hope, whatever. But I do deal with, and I've been not playing with, but just looking at this more, anxiety. Whether it is, when we say anxiety, we usually think of it as a negative, like with worry, but I realize that I bring on anxiety myself by being involved in so much, saying yes to so much, having so many projects, and I can start feeling anxious about these things I have voluntarily chosen to do that in and of themselves I'm excited about, but you put enough on them and the duties of life. And I deal with anxiety. When I do that, my propensity, my natural inclination is to isolate.
Right.
Not to reach out, not to join.
Chuck it all. I'm going to go either off by myself or withdraw.
I may be to a point of maturity to know I need to go talk with you, but I'm not sitting there in my chair going, oh, I really feel like I want to.
Right. And that is so hard.
Yeah.
And this is where counseling and cognitive behavioral therapy and, the world of depression and anxiety is so, it's related to all these things. So if we took Kevin on that particular day, and maybe you had a little bit less sleep, a little bit too much sugar, a little bit too much caffeine, a little bit too much of this and too much of that, then your propensity of isolation is now that much more, right? So they're all bubbling in together in this pot of soup that we call Kevin Miller, and you boil over one day and one day you don't. And so again, as we, big picture this, and people are out there, I'm a little bit blue. What can I do about this? The headlines are going to be ketamine, psilocybin, magic mushrooms, and marijuana and whatever, because that doesn't mean you have to go over here and tend your bubbling pot of everything. That's hard.
I want relief. I mean, my gosh, if I did not have to, if I could have the level of performance and clarity that I have now with a pill, as opposed to having to eat, even though that you and I talk about, I've gotten
enjoying the food.
I know I do like Brussels sprouts. I do like, but my gosh, if it's just me, ice cream, pizza,
bar,
seafood chimichanga, man. I'm
somebody
there.
else to come and make it for me and all of that.
Okay. Well, you keep leading into my next points, which is divine. And the next one was just awareness, personal, but we talked about being present and solitude and stuff, but even that often is a way to look at is awareness of me, not just loathing or whatever, but just awareness of myself. I just recently, because it's interesting, about a year ago, no, it was earlier this year, 9 months ago, I had Beth McCord. She's an expert on the Enneagram. Lots of experts on Enneagram, but she's made a big hit in it, and she's done it from a faith-based standpoint. So she mixes God within that. But my wife on her podcast, which is called Brainy Moms, they just had another Enneagram expert on there. So it got me back into it, looking at it again. And man, I started digging in on some areas and just realizing continually of my own lack of self-awareness, but excitement at becoming more self-aware. That can be devastating. Yeah. It can be exciting. It depends on where you are, but either way, man, most of us in a place of depression, of being blue, we're often, I'm going to say, on the spectrum of unaware.
Yeah. We want to,
of who we are, how we are, why we are.
It's the tendency of, I'm scared in the dark and I want to hide under the covers. Just make it go away.
Yeah.
And that would be the 5-year-old response over here.
I don't want to look in the mirror and consider myself.
And getting out from under the covers, it's cold. It's too bright. The light is on. Right. I mean, even Jesus said that, right? Shine a light on the darkness over here. We talk about the fish doesn't see the water. They're unaware of the water that they're in, the dirt, the schmutz, the whatever. And in fact, remember when you and I, we even contemplated awareness as a name for the clinic, as a name for the show, the Awareness Broadcasting Company.
I used that for a while.
And so awareness is both wonderful, like, wow, this is the aha moment of enlightenment, of click. The light is on and I can see this thing I was looking for. And the other one of turn the light off. You're exposing my nakedness.
We just watched The Matrix again. And the scene in there where he says, I wish I had not taken the blue pill. Ignorance is bliss.
That's because the guy's eating a steak and he says, I don't want to know nothing.
I know the steak is not really juicy and tasty and whatever, and it plays, you hear the piano music, ignorance is bliss. And he bites into it. And there are some aspects of, I've wondered, as talking about depression, I have known some of the most tremendous mentors and people in my life who struggled with depression. It's like the more you become aware of, the more the gravity of life, it can be daunting. Yeah. We want to say it's all exciting, but sometimes, man,
the more aware you are, the more grave things could become.
Yeah.
You and I were talking yesterday about experts sometimes get overwhelmed. Like, think about Einstein struggled with this because he could not define energy. At the end of his brilliance, what he could not do, even though he's 10 times better than every other human on the planet, and he bent underneath that. And then if that's true of him and his expertise, then who am I? And I don't want some of that light to be exposed, but at the same time, it's hard to live life without light and being able to see where things are. So here we are again in that big picture thing. Everybody is aware of what they're aware of and unaware of what they're unaware of.
Yeah.
So we're saying, have a posture, a mindset, a thought process, an eating pattern and a sleep pattern to appropriately and with grace and honesty and integrity wake up every day and say, okay, I'm willing to have some of my dirty laundry exposed to my own mind and do the best I can and be in relationship with myself and with God and my friends and my wife and my dog, and go forward. And I'm going to actually hope for some awareness, some enlightenment that allows me to be becoming a better version of myself as unto God as best we can, and then go to bed with a sense of peace and satisfaction.
All right. I'm going to pull out another
Whew.
piece. Another piece here of, we talked about relationships and we talked about community in general, as opposed to isolation. But I want to tease out the actual who that we're with, because I hadn't thought about it in these terms until we did this show here right now. But that we're saying, one, we're going to uplift, better to be with people generally. However, what is our propensity again when we are depressed? Just like we are prone nutritionally to go to comfort food, and when we're depressed, we go to comfort people, which may not be what we need. Maybe, I mean, if it's comfort and it's, your mom to come and give you comfort, that's great. But often what we could use is somebody to help pull us out, somebody to help us see something different, not to counteract us, not to Pollyanna things,
Right.
to have empathy, but also to change us. And we know the power of people. It's Jim Rohn who's famous for saying we are the sum ultimately of the 5 people we hang around most. Whether it's that's not an exact number, whether it's 3 people or 15 people or whatever, but it's so influencing. You and I have experienced this in different realms. If I go hang out with athletes, man, the propensity and idea and expectation of myself for my own athletic endeavors goes up. If I hang out with I'll just name this throughout my lifetime. When I go hang out with wealthy guys, because it's who I hang out with more, is wealthy guys, my own expectation and comfort with thinking about myself being a wealthier person and having that ability goes up. Being with faith-based people, it matters. This is why Weight Watchers is one of the most successful, and AA, I would say, 2 of the most successful organizations, because we surround ourselves with people who lift us up. They're there to commiserate, but they're also there to lift it. Let's band together and progress.
Right.
And it's the power of that.
The blue zone idea
exactly.
of that we have in the office here, that we've worked really hard to create, that people do. Years ago, I actually had to make a rule of, in this office, you are not allowed to bring in fast food. It stinks the place up and it brings all of us down. And that's a concrete thing. Even as you and I talk about, gray and less concrete, there are still concretes that you and I have chosen. We're not going to we don't bring fast food in. And even though we don't even think about that anymore, that's kind of a concrete, right? Like, it's not a moral kind of a thing, but if you brought in fast food, I would call you out.
Yeah.
And vice versa, to call you up, not to shame you, but to say, hey, that pathway is not the best kind of pathway to where I know you want to go. And then we as an office, we as a family, and the opposite of that, I would suggest to people who tend to be blue, and then they go looking for people to tell me I'm okay in my schmutz over here. And it's a codependency.
Okay. I was debating whether to bring up, because we won't name a name, but an acute issue. You and I experienced that together with an employee that was here when I first started working with you at the practice, and she had a hard life, hard place, and she made so much progress. I mean, it was some life-changing things on the aspects of faith and health and hope and whatever. And then, trial happened, stress happened. And what did she do? Boom. She went right back to the people who had hurt her the most, but it was comfort in that hurt. It was comfort in the hurt.
Validation.
Yeah.
Justification that my angry, wounded feelings are validated. Yeah. And I'm so sorry, because
she wanted relief,
change. Right. And also relief from any sense of guilt that her own behavior had any part to do with her woundedness. Yeah. And again, we're all on the spectrum of this. So me too, right? Like, I want somebody to pat me on the back and say, oh yeah, you're the best, and that other person did wrong and whatever. And so this is one of those, again, it gets you out from under the covers. It's cold and you feel naked and exposed. And like I would say to the fish in that dirty water over here, I think this is an analogy is good. And this is in fact true of fish at home. If you don't clean their tank eventually they'll die, but it's this slow, lingering death that is kind of like American society. When you clean the tank, you have to take the fish out, right? And put them over here in bright, sunshiny water.
Yeah.
Well, when you first do that and you drop them into this new water, what do they tend to do? And they
spin around.
Yeah, they tend to, oh, I don't like it. And what does a fish do when they can't breathe? When you're transferring them over, they freak out. I can't breathe. And then you drop them over here and they spin around but in a minute or two, they settle down and they are weller.
Yeah.
What if you took that fish and just dropped him back in the tank over here? Very quickly, they would just die. Okay, now imagine Americans. And I say, patient, Mrs. Smith, you're in the schmutz over here. You don't know it, but we're looking at your biomarkers or even your attitude or your depression. Now, what we need to do is we're going to scoop you up and we're going to pull you over here, but you're going to say, I don't like exercise. I don't like this food. I don't like going caffeine free. I don't like going gluten free. It hurts me. I'm like, yeah, I know. Bear with it for a while. We're going to drop you over here in this clean, clear, crisp water, but it's cold and the brightness is too bright. And but ultimately you're becoming weller versus where you would have been over here.
Yeah. Now, to your credit though, and I've seen you grow in this over the past years, you are much more gracious and tactful in doing that in steps. Coming back to the muse that we always use, the patient that you said at the time, man, the most acute thing for you is you've got to get off the gluten, the bread, the whatever, even if in the meanwhile, you need to keep smoking,
right?
To help you do that. Cause it's the most acute thing. I love that analogy and taking baby steps to where people are according to.
Yeah, my friend Denver, who is a clinician and back in the day, a long time ago, was, in the military, smoke a pack a day and really hard charging, whatever. And in late 30s had a heart attack. And so, boom, awareness, pain, and action. He knew he shouldn't smoke. He knew he should go to bed on time. He knew all of that. But then along comes a, 37-year-old heart attack. And he's like, so awareness happens. And what was his first step? Was instead of I think he was doing like a 6-pack or 12-pack of Pepsi, he changed to Gatorade. Not that much better, but it's a step.
Yeah, it's a step. Sure.
And so he tells the story and says that was my first step. There's no way that you can cold turkey quit everything and come over here. So that's the point of today. And in fact, what you just started out with, awareness and then blue zones, or the people you're hanging around with, is wow, to recognize that I'm a codependent person on this other person, and we just commiserate in a way that's unhealthy for us, that keeps us over here in the schmutz. How do I help that guy out? How do that guy help me? How do I go find a new friend? That's pulling the Band-Aid off pretty hard.
Well, I actually was thinking about that though. Like right now, if you are suffering from being blue, if you're trying to help somebody in your life who's the best person to help, it's probably not the polar opposite. It's not Kevin Miller, who's not really dealt with depression and trauma a whole lot. Find somebody who has dealt with it deeply and overcome it, who can commiserate, who can empathize, and who knows
from a position of helping
the way out. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If you're
a drowning person, don't go find another drowning person. Because you're gonna
find somebody who learned to swim,
but
maybe not somebody who's never known drowning as well. Now, if you want to commiserate or get help on how do you on wrecking a business and recovering, I can meet you there, man. I know that one. but that's relevant too, to look at the who.
If you want to talk to a person who completely ignores pain and ignores their labs and keeps eating gluten because I just refuse to believe it.
Oh, well,
I can talk with you about that.
Yeah. Well, and this goes back to, we mentioned AA. You have a sponsor. Your sponsor is not somebody who's never known.
That's right. AA is a great model.
Yeah, it is.
It's not finding the guy, you're drowning in the water. Don't talk to your friend in the desert who has no idea what you're talking about, but talk to the guy who's on the ladder over there, who's got a good foothold and can reach back and give you a hand up.
These again, ingredients. I hope they're opportunities, menu items to look at, not as opposed to, but in addition to the ones that the only two that we generally see out there in the populace, which is medications pharmaceuticals, which you said multiple times.
Yeah,
Thank
fine.
God for them,
Yeah.
for when they're needed, for when things are acute, and counseling. And to some degree, you can make a case. I'll make a case that we could all use some counseling all the time. It needs to not have the stigma that has. It might not be psychotherapy. We've got coaches these days, but somebody who can help you look at yourself, who can help draw it out with wise counsel, or even just being there. If you don't have a person, if you don't, I get to have a Randy in my life, somebody who I don't have to pay you, and you care about me, you know me, you can give insight to me. That is a gift. It's incredibly rare. It's a complete privilege. Thank you, God. And not having that, sometimes the greatest place, the easiest place to go, or the most relevant, is go pay for it. Go get a coach, go get a counselor, go get somebody. In churches, sometimes they have the opportunities for a pastor who will do that, though I think pastors are often leaned on that when they are not actually good counselors. So, look there, but
I also want to drop a list in here, because you and I, we always circle back to these basics, these big things, but there is a list of, what about ketamine? What about mushrooms? What about going to Mexico and getting a whatever? And we're not saying no to that. Those are expensive, risky, dangerous, and you need really wise and good counsel down those pathways. But what about some of the other things that are on the list of people saying, okay, I'm really working hard on all those things, but I read about low dose naltrexone. I read about sauna therapy. I read about these things. And so if I were dipping into that, as much as I would lean on nutrition, exercise, sleep, and Kevin to help me to pull out of this sense of blueness, the kinds of things that I would lean on, barring the extremes where medicines would be the case. And probably right now, I would go out and invest in an infrared sauna. And we've talked about light therapy, and is that good for your mind and your mood and your brain and stuff like that? Is it the fact that you're taking 20 minutes of solitude to just sit there that helps you? Or is it the actual nanometers of wavelength of the near infrared, far infrared, and stuff like that? To the person who's like ready to spend some money and time on, you're doing medicines, you're doing friendship, you're doing counseling, I would look at sauna therapy. And at the same time, I would look at light therapy. So yes, go out in the sun. We've already talked about that. Go forest bathing. Light is good for you, but should you pay for a Vilight? Should you pay for our friend Lifelight? There's multiple companies. And if you want to Google this, it's photobiomodulation. Does light help mood? Does it prevent dementia? Yes. So I would say go be in the sun. But when do you pay for certain nanometers of wavelength and shove them, and one of them actually clips to the inside of your nose? And it's really weird, right? Now it's like otherworldly, futuristic, and all of that. Does it help people? Yeah. So what's the right person to do that? I don't know.
And for most people in a city, I guess if you look up infrared sauna, you should be able to find some places where you go do it, just like a suntan booth. You just pay for time in it, right?
And that's where I'd say go to Google, kind of
health clubs may have them,
figure it out, look around. Low dose naltrexone is something for people to be aware of, or LDN as it's called, lowdosenaltrexone.org. And is it a viable pharmaceutical, very cheap thing that can help? Yeah, that's a reasonable thing. Marijuana, we've CBD, marijuana, we talked about those things in the past, but these are all on the list of it within the context of the foundation and the basics. Yes. What about HBOT? HBOT is hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Is oxygen good for you? Yes. Can there be too little? Yes. Can there be too much? Yes. Is it a poison? Yes. Will it explode? Yes. You better be careful, but you'll die without it. Do most of us not breathe well? Yes. We did a whole show on breath work and all that. Well, what if you go pay somebody to shove a little bit more inside of you? Okay. There's a time and a place for that. You can go buy your own HBOT. Do you know that? Your own little, it's a foldable kind of a thing, and you pump it up, and for a couple $1,000, you can have your own hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Now, the reason I'm interested in that is because we live at 9,000 feet and there is less oxygen here, and therefore that matters. And then the other one there is neurofeedback. You've got cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a person feeding back to you and saying, well, that's not smart. Let's try it this way. What if somebody's got a thing on your head and is reading your alpha, beta, theta, delta waves and says, when you do that, your beta waves go all wonky. Let me throw some alpha waves into your head here and also counsel you to do that. And I would say, yeah, that's really valuable, but it's time and money and effort. And, that's where people wind up in my office. There's so many options out there that they're confused. And now they need help to where do I spend my limited time and money and effort and energy?
Well, and as I'm thinking about this, as we wrap up here, I probably will go back and add it to the intro to make sure, because it was probably a good place to start with all of this to some degree. If we are talking, as you're hearing this, if you are in this spectrum of dealing with depression, being blue, feeling blue, whatever, or if you are maybe even more so, if you're looking at somebody you're trying to help or you care for, is we at the core of it is motive. Is, especially if you're looking at your spouse or your teen or your whatever, what is the motive? I mean, we're looking at
why behind their what.
Yeah. Where can we meet them there and give and address what is a purpose for them to, as you said, roll the covers back, get out of the warmth,
which is exactly what they don't want to do.
Yeah. But what is the motive? We find that it's one of the most, it can be one of the most compelling ingredients, fuels is the motive. And
we, to be gracious to people who are there, it's one of the most terrifying things. And it's why people keep their head under the covers.
Yeah.
So is that a bad place to end?
No, that's weighty. It's a weighty issue. Yeah. And I hope that people can hear this. Yeah. With compassion, but hear it with hope for, hey, here's all I've seen. We often are so narrow in our own thoughts towards addressing a problem or a goal, that here are so many more things that we can add in. And actually, I'm right now thinking about what you said. What's the best, Dr. James, what is the best exercise?
The one you'll do.
The one you'll do. So here's a list of whatever we have, 13
Take the
things.
step you'll take.
Yeah. There you go.